Good afternoon. I am Nicole Austin Hillary, and I have the pleasure and privilege of serving as the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. And I would like to welcome each of you to our Policy for the People Economic Advancement Summit. I know there are many of you joining us from around the country and many who are joining us from around the globe. And we are so pleased to have you here with us. You know, we started our summit today with a session earlier on Black banks and home ownership and the importance of both working together to increase economic stability and strength in the global Black community. If you missed it, I'm sorry, but I'm glad you're here with us now because there's so much more that we have to cover. And if you did miss it, there are ways for you to get that information because it is needed. We are here to be about the business today at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. You know, our mission is simply this: to empower the global Black community. And there is no other way that we can think of to focus on empowering our communities than looking at economics and the power of economics and how it changes our community, how it shapes our communities, and how it helps to give us strength so that we can chart our own courses and make the future that we think we want to have in our communities possible for all of us. It is about equity and it is about economic justice. And we're pleased to have you around the table with us today. You know, today is not just an opportunity for you to hear from amazing experts, but you will. We have policy advocates, we have scholars, we have experts who work on advocacy and grassroots experts who are going to be here today talking with us about critically important issues. And this session this afternoon is going to help us to understand some of the changes that we've seen at the highest judicial levels here in the nation, particularly our Supreme Court, and what changes around affirmative action mean to education and the tool of education, which has allowed us as a community to advance economically and for generations to come. It is critical that we all work together and collaborate and think strategically about how we not only grow our communities, but how we give our communities the information and the mechanisms that are needed to be the change makers we want to be and to create the differences that we want to see. And that's what today's summit is about. And that's what this particular session coming up is about. I encourage you not to just simply sit and listen, but to engage. There's a chat room that's going to be open. You can offer comments. Our speakers will see your comments. They will work to address your comments. But I also charge you with going back to your individual communities. Talk about the things you've learned here today. Talk about some of the methodologies and the tools that are being shared with you today, because each of us has an opportunity to be leaders within our own communities, no matter where you sit. Doesn't matter if you're in Kansas, if you're in Chicago, if you are in San Diego. We each have an opportunity to create leadership and to make changes in our communities. And that's what we're hoping for today. In fact, that's what we do at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and what we've been doing for decades. We are a tool and a vehicle to ensure that you have the information that you need to be the change makers you want to be and to be the change makers that we all collectively know we can be. I would like to thank our sponsors, Southwest Airlines and Visa, for helping to make today's summit possible. Without their support, it would be nearly impossible for us to bring everyone together, to have these kinds of exchanges, to have these kinds of community building efforts that are so important to us here at the foundation and that are at the heart of our Center for Policy Analysis and Research, which is the division here at the foundation that is responsible for this summit and works to make sure that you all have the relevant research that you need so that you are informed about the issues that are important to our communities. I want to also encourage you to walk away from today with some to-dos. What are you going to do to make a difference? How are you going to carry these conversations on? And we encourage you to continue those conversations with us. We have events and discussions throughout the year. We have our National Racial Equity Initiative for Social Justice having a seminar and a session coming up in November, and we invite you to rejoin us. This work is not about one day. It's not about one summit. It is about continuous action to make certain that we are making our communities strong and equitable and fair and just. So with that, I would like to introduce the Vice President for our Center for Policy Analysis and Research, Dr. Jonathan Cox, who will continue with introductions and carry us forward with today's session. And again, I look forward to seeing you all around the virtual table and around the in-person table as we join arm in arm and stand shoulder to shoulder to be the difference that we want to see and to be the change makers that we want to see. Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Policy for the People Economic Advancement Summit. I am Dr. Jonathan Cox, Vice President of CPAR, and I'm deeply honored to be here with you today for this important event. Now, in the Center for Policy Analysis and Research, we are committed to improving the socioeconomic circumstances of Black Americans by providing timely, relevant analysis and policy recommendations that directly address pressing issues impacting Black communities. Now, throughout today, across 3 virtual sessions, we embark on a profound exploration of an issue that is really vital. It's the economic advancement of Black people. Now, in our first session earlier this morning, as Nicole said, we explored the power of banking Black. We confronted the disparities in home ownership rates and envisioned a future where Black-owned financial institutions really act as catalysts, bridging gaps and creating financial security within our communities. Now, in this second session, we confront the consequences of the dismantling of affirmative action, recognizing that educational opportunities are paramount to economic empowerment. Now, we dissect the complexities of affirmative action, aiming to redefine the narrative and create avenues where every dream can thrive, unencumbered by systemic biases. On our third and final session that will begin at 3 p.m. today, we acknowledge the historical significance of unions in the fight against racism and inequality. Now, through the lens of labor activism, we explore the enduring impacts of unions on Black economic outcomes. Together, we seek to amplify the voices of workers, fostering solidarity, empowerment, and social change. Now, our commitment to open-minded inquiry at CBCF really sets the tone for today's discussions. We're here not just to talk, but to listen, to learn, and to act. And we recognize that economic advancement is not just some lofty goal that we have, but it's a fundamental right for all. It's about dismantling barriers, overcoming disparities, and creating opportunities where they are desperately needed for so many people. Now, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the CBCF team, our sponsors, moderators, our panelists, and every single participant who joined us today. Your presence really signifies your commitment to this cause, and it's this type of dedication that fuels the engine of change and propels us forward. Now, our shared goal today is not just to gain knowledge, but to turn that knowledge into action, right? Let's leave this summit not only inspired, but also equipped with the tools, ideas, and connections necessary to make a difference in our communities. Now, we are the change that we seek, as Nicole said. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome the board chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and representative of Alabama's 7th Congressional District, Congresswoman Terry A. Sewell.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Sewell of Alabama's 7th Congressional District, and I'm proud to serve as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Board of Directors. It is on behalf of the entire CBCF board that I welcome you to our Policy for the People Economic Advancement Summit. Today, I join you as a staunch advocate for economic equity, empowerment, and justice for the Black community. During these times, as critical as they are, I know that our collective efforts can pave the way for meaningful change. In Alabama's 7th Congressional District, I have seen firsthand the economic challenges facing our communities. I have seen hardworking families striving for a better future who are too often hindered by systemic barriers that have persisted for generations. All across this nation, limited access to education, job opportunities, and affordable housing has created a cycle of poverty that we must break. To be clear, our struggles do not define us. Instead, they serve as a testament to our resilience and determination. We are a community rich in history, culture, and innovation. We are entrepreneurs, scholars, and visionaries, and it is high time for our economic realities to align with our potential. During today's summit, we join together not only to discuss our challenges, but to find solutions. We acknowledge the disparity in home ownership and recognize the power of initiatives like Banking Black, which can uplift our neighborhoods and empower future generations. We confront the consequences of dismantling affirmative action, and we understand the urgent need to create educational pathways that lead to prosperity. We celebrate the powerful role of unions in closing the wage gap and creating workplaces that are fair and just and equitable. Today's summit is not just a conference. It is a call to action. It is a reminder that the policies we advocate for, the decisions we make, and the partnerships that we form can reshape the economic landscape of our communities and indeed the entire Black community. I urge you to engage deeply, to question passionately, and to collaborate fiercely. Let us not just discuss the need for change. Let us be the change. It is my hope that you will leave this summit not only with insight, but with actionable strategies and shared determination to transform our communities. As we forge ahead, let us never forget that the power to change lies within us. Let us harness that power, working hand in hand to usher in an era of economic prosperity for all. Thank you again for joining us. It is now my honor to introduce my colleague and friend, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and representative of Nevada's 4th Congressional District, Congressman Stephen Horsford.
Hello, I'm Congressman Stephen Horsford, and I'm proud to represent Nevada's 4th Congressional District and to serve as chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. Thank you for joining today's event aimed at informing economic advancement policy discussions. As someone deeply committed to confronting the economic challenges faced by the individuals residing in Nevada's 4th Congressional District, as well as the entire Black community across the country, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with all of you today. In these times of unprecedented challenges, our collective resolve and dedication to economic equity are more critical than ever. In the vibrant and diverse communities and nationwide, economic disparities persist. Too often, our families face barriers that hinder their progress, such as limited access to quality education, job opportunities, and affordable housing. It's not just a matter of statistics, it's about the dreams deferred, the potential untapped, and the opportunities denied. But today, here at the Policy for the People Economic Advancement Summit, we gather with a shared purpose to transform these challenges into opportunities. We recognize that economic empowerment is not just a policy goal, it is a moral imperative. We must ensure that every individual, regardless of their background, has a fair shot at success. And we must create pathways that uplift our communities, that break the cycle of poverty and foster generational wealth. In the discussions today, explore the complexities of these economic issues, dissect the root causes, and envision innovative solutions. As leaders, advocates, and change makers, we have the power to influence policy, inspire change, and to make a difference in the lives of so many. Our mission is clear: to bridge the divide, to eliminate disparities, and to build a future where economic opportunities are accessible to all. It's about creating an environment where every child can dream without limitations, where every entrepreneur can thrive, and where every family can experience financial security and upward mobility. I urge you to engage passionately, collaborate wholeheartedly, and advocate fearlessly during your discussions. Let's commit ourselves to tangible actions that will drive change. Together, we can create policies that uplift communities, empower individuals, and redefine what is possible for the Black community in America. So thank you for your dedication, your passion, and your commitment to this vital cause. Let's work hand in hand to build a future of economic advancement, opportunity, and prosperity for all. Thank you for your presence today and your persistence in securing a more equitable future for everyone.
Thank you so much, Congressman Horsford. Now, I know at this point, everybody is ready to dive into the discussion for this session. So it is my distinct honor to now introduce our moderator, Valerie Ralston Wilson. Now, Valerie Ralston Wilson is a labor economist and director of the Economic Policy Institute's program on race, ethnicity, and the economy, a nationally recognized source for expert reports and policy analyses on the economic condition of America's people of color. In this role, Wilson has worked to elevate EPI's thought leadership on issues of racial and economic justice and to expand the PREE's capacity to prescribe policy solutions that center racial equity. Prior to joining EPI, Wilson served as vice president of research at the National Urban League, where she played a pivotal role in the production of the organization's annual signature publication, The State of Black America, and assisted the historic civil rights organization in shaping its national economic policy. Please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Valerie Ralston Wilson. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon to all of you joining us. I would like to briefly introduce our panelists for today, and then we can jump right into this discussion. We are joined, first of all, I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order, by Kayla Jones, who is a PhD student at Cornell University in the Brooks School of Public Policy. Kayla is also a former senior research assistant at the Division of Consumer and Community Affairs at the Federal Reserve Board. Upon completing her PhD, Kayla plans to conduct research on policies to increase intergenerational mobility and socioeconomic well-being, particularly among low-income marginalized populations. So welcome, Kayla. Next, we will be joined by Dr. LaTanya White, who is the recipient of the North Star and Innovative New Scholar Awards for Entrepreneurship, Education, and Research. Dr. White is a two-time author, a TEDx speaker, and founder of Concept Creative Group, a professional and management development training firm focused on empowering Black entrepreneurs, their families, and their communities. Welcome, LaTanya. And then last but not least, Dr. Harry L. Williams serves as president and CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which is the nation's largest organization exclusively representing the Black college community. TMCF's 47 member schools are America's publicly supported, historically Black colleges and universities, and predominantly Black institutions. These institutions educate nearly 300,000 students, and under Dr. Williams' leadership, TMCF has created innovative partnerships, increased organizational stability, and advanced bipartisan HBCU support. So welcome to Dr. Williams. Just as a means of sort of table setting for this discussion, I want to start off with the idea of what affirmative action is and some myth busting about what it is not, which has been at the center of a lot of the legal challenges. So affirmative action is a set of policies and programs that seek to redress past discrimination through active measures to ensure equal opportunity. Now, in the case of education, affirmative action policies seek to increase access to education and bridge inequities in the school admissions process for groups that have been historically discriminated against. Now, I want to ask each of our panelists to respond to this first question. Thinking about what is your response to the claims that affirmative action itself is a form of discrimination, or that it isn't based on merit? And in responding to that, what do you think is the most important reason that we have to continue fighting for affirmative action? I'm going to start with Kayla.
Oh, yes. So first, I always say that the claim that affirmative action is a form of discrimination is definitely misguided, and that instead it's a tool to promote equal opportunity as well as equity along economic and educational opportunities. So affirmative action policies, they take systematic disparities into account and aims to level the playing field and provide equal access to education. And just to the second point, unfortunately, affirmative action is often criticized with the claim that it undermines merit-based admissions. However, it's important to take a holistic approach to understanding what merit is and that diverse perspectives actually increase merit, and that diverse people in the classroom help to improve the overall educational environment, which is something that has been documented in several research studies.
Thank you. Dr. White.
Absolutely. And thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to contribute to the conversation. I have a colleague who's a PhD student at Howard University, and her research really explores America as a startup and looking at the founding and the funding of higher education institutions, even down to how we got to land grant universities and what those institutions were designed to do, which was to usher in the industrial era, right? So we really have to start with how we began and take a look at how that through line has shown up throughout history. And it's really, it all comes down to someone needs to be in power. And there has to be some chasm. There has to be some space between the have and the have nots for there to be this form of power. And when we think about affirmative action being, is it a merit based or does it take away from the discussion around merit based admissions? What we are leaving out of the conversation are the people who are evaluating the applications. So we talk about systemic and structural racism. We talk about the policies, advancing racial equity. We talk about the programs, but we aren't talking about the practices of the individuals that are perpetuating some of these problems.
Thank you. Dr. Williams, would you weigh in on
Yes,
this as
first,
well?
yeah, thank you, Dr. Wilson. And I agree with Dr. Jones and Dr. White in their assessment as it relates to affirmative action. The way we look at it here at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund is pretty simple. It's about fairness. It's about equity. It's about leveling, as Dr. Jones indicated, leveling the playing field and looking at it. So it's not an advantage. I said this to an audience about 2 weeks ago, and I said, Black people, we don't need affirmative action. We don't. We don't need affirmative action because to help us. Affirmative action benefits all of us from that perspective, and it's this tag that it only supports Black people, and that's just not true. And the reality is about looking at the people that have been discriminated the most, and in this country, it's been Black people, people who have been left behind the most, Black people. So when you have programs in place that is set up with the sole purpose of dealing with those inequities that has been existing in our country for hundreds of years, that have impacted our community in a significant way, you're taking that first step. And our namesake, Justice Thurgood Marshall here, who we represent, that legacy, got up every single day focusing on how do we tear down this system that is not fair for Black people to advance in this country. And so when we look at affirmative action, we're taking it from a social justice perspective as it relates to equity and leveling the playing field. So this decision that was just recently made here in the Supreme Court, it was a decision that was a slap in the face to all of the champions who fought so hard to create opportunities that will allow for us to continue to go to those Ivy League schools. And that will continue to happen, as I state, because we know that we represent quality at the highest level. And affirmative action is just a tool that's been used to kind of help level the playing field for African Americans in this country.
So I think each of you addressed this issue that the inequities that affirmative action is intended to address are not new. They're things that have been in existence in this country since its founding. I think it's also true that efforts to try to dismantle and roll back affirmative action are not new either. Since the policy was put in place, folks have been trying to take it apart. But at the point where we are now, where we have a Supreme Court ruling saying that universities cannot consider race as a basis of admissions policies, I'd like to get into some discussion of where that leaves us now and what should we be considering moving forward. Kayla, I want to come back to you as the economist and public policy scholar on the panel. and ask what are some of the potential or expected economic consequences for underrepresented students in higher education following this decision?
Yes, I would say that the main impact of this ruling is that it will increase enrollment at historically Black colleges and universities, which is definitely a positive factor. However, looking at the history and the reality of these institutions, a lot of them have been receiving unequitable funding from state and local governments. So I would say that it's up to those government systems to address those disparities and provide those institutions with the resources they need in order to build more dorms, to hire more educators, just to have more factors in place to help sustain that increased enrollment due to the SCOTUS ruling.
So we've also talked a bit about higher education being a pathway to economic mobility. Latanya, how can we ensure that Black people, Brown people have access to opportunities for upward mobility in light of this decision?
Mm-hmm. And I think for members of the audience who may struggle to make the connection right between access to higher education and literally America's global competitiveness, when we leave untapped talent literally on the floor, that means we're leaving opportunities for innovation, for new businesses, for new job, and for economic mobility and wealth mobility. That is what impacts and that is what drives America's economic position. So we are compromising America's position in the global economy when we leave people out of the discussion. And so when we're talking about how do we reconcile that, what are the pathways that we take, it really is, and I love the format of the summit today, because each part of economic advancement, home ownership, higher wages, and education is being unpacked today. And so what the impetus is we need voices, activists, advocates in every space. Like in higher education, the folks in higher education can't solve the problem alone. The folks in the home ownership industry, they can't do it by themselves. The folks in the labor unions, they cannot do it by themselves. Unless we talk about the Black church and the power of the Black church to drive economic mobility in our communities, it really is going to take all hands on deck and to move in unison towards this very important goal.
Thank you for that. I think another important part of this conversation is thinking about what undermining, dismantling affirmative action means economically for Black and Brown students, but also on the other side, leaving in place legacy admissions that disproportionately advantage white students. So, Dr. Williams, I want to ask you, what are the economic implications of making it perhaps more difficult for Black students to gain admissions to higher education while not touching this other sort of affirmative action that continues to disproportionately advantage white students?
Well, Dr. Wilson, that's a great way. That's a great analogy too. And I just, what Dr. White and Dr. Jones just indicated, I want to weigh in a little bit on that because they said some good, really good stuff as it relates to um, um, economic opportunities and economic mobility and the power of education and what that means to our community in particular, and what HBCUs have been doing for this country for over 150 years and creating the Black middle class as we know it today. Without HBCUs, there wouldn't be a Black middle class like it is today, because those institutions were created because of the need to have education for former slaves that when they exit, they can have the right to go to a white institution. So we created these great institutions that we have that have created this amazing economic community that we have that has created opportunity for our more Black lawyers, more Black doctors. HBCUs have been in the forefront of all of that. We have a slogan here at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. When you walk in, it says education pays off. So we believe in the power of encouraging our community to take advantage of educational opportunities. When you mention our membership, we have 47 publicly supported historically Black colleges and universities, but we just added 6 historically Black community colleges. They're called HBCCs. And these institutions were created with the same spirit in mind, but they were for 2-year focus on workforce development and creating opportunities in our communities. These particular institutions are located in the South. 6 are in Alabama, but all of them, there are 12 total, and they're all in the South. And they were all focused on economic workforce development, opportunities to lift you up and lift the community up. And what we do know based on this recent decision, Dr. Wilson, it's funny, they carved out in here that you can't use race to go to the elite schools, with the exception of the military academies. You notice that we can go to the West Point, we can go to a Navy Academy, and we can use race for that purpose because it's going to defend our country, which I think is kind of interesting as it relates to that particular decision and those legacy. That's a form of affirmative action in terms of creating opportunities. So yes, it's an interesting way to look at this. But as Kayla referenced earlier about the attention that will be placed on historically Black colleges now because of this decision, and what I can say, we are seeing a significant, and not because of this decision, but a lot of it because of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and some of the things that happened in our country that put a spotlight on our community in terms of the inequities that exist in the healthcare arena, inequities that exist in our economic space for Blacks in this country. And so HBCUs have been that answer, that positive answer of helping to play a role in lifting people up in this space. But as Kayla referenced, the reality, our community, our institutions, we're not ready for that influx of students coming because of the lack of funding that has been in place for over 150 years in terms of our funding from the states that they owe our institutions. So when you go and look at our campuses, they may not be up to the par of some of our white institutions that have been fully funded. HBCUs have never been fully funded. And so until we address that, and there's pressure that we're putting on our members of Congress and state governments to look at that issue, because that's a critical component of this as it relates to this particular decision and the renewed interest in HBCUs and their value. And what we do know, Dr. Wilson, that students who graduate from historically Black colleges and universities, and we run the data on this, versus students who graduated from historically white institutions, over their lifetime, they can earn over $1 million more, those students earn, than students who attend historically white institutions. So that is significant, and that is very important for our community. But we have to have the infrastructure in place. We have to have the facilities and reoccurring dollars that's coming in that's going to take care of those deferred maintenance issues that exist on our campuses.
That's so important to note and to understand the value and the importance of HBCUs for educating Black people in this country, and the fact that, that as a community, African Americans have long understood the value of education and higher education and taken steps to do that. And I can personally attest to what you say about HBCU education. I'm an HBCU graduate, and I have no qualms in saying that had a huge impact on my decision to go to graduate school. I probably wouldn't be an economist today if I had attended an HBCU, because that was a profession that I had never even considered. And so it really is important
and that's why I'm sorry, Dr. Wilson, but I'm glad you said that. But that's why we want the audience who are listening, to really look at what's happening on our HBCU campuses because of that, what you just mentioned, in terms of the quality that you can get, and you can be yourself in an environment where you can evolve into what like you just said, you had no idea you were going to be that. But when you went there, someone told you that. And when they said that to you, you believed it. Now look at you, have a PhD in this area. So I think that's the value of our community. Both of my sons graduated from Howard University and have thrived because of that space and that we say here at TMCF that we are unapologetically Black, meaning that we don't apologize about it. We are very clear on the role when you are focused and specifically focused on supporting our community and what it's going to do to the community at large.
Yeah. Kayla, Latanya, I wonder if you guys want to jump in on this issue of affirmative action versus legacy admissions and the economic implications of that.
Well, Kayla, congratulations on your doctoral journey. I feel like to your question, Dr. Wilson, I will probably write a whole nother dissertation on this topic. So I'll defer to Kayla just to kind of reel my emotions in around this.
Yes, I would say it definitely, unfortunately, just reinforces like legacy of socioeconomic inequality. And thinking about job access, there are a lot of jobs, particularly in business, finance, and tech, that do recruiting at predominantly white institutions. So thinking about how those jobs create upward mobility for those groups, and how thinking about recruiting strategies, and it's up to those corporations to be more inclusive and to go to HBCUs and to recruit students, and thinking about overall how with legacy admissions, how it's just going to continue this rising income inequality that we currently see in our economy, and thinking about the future, what that means for Black and Brown students and job access in the future.
I think also when we talk about the issue of race, we have to go a step further and talk about the intersectional nature of race and gender and its impact on Black women in particular. And so I want to pose this to the panel. How do gender and race intersect in this context to shape the challenges and opportunities faced by Black women in our access to spaces of higher education?
I'm happy to lead this part of the discussion. So a part of my research really explored the impacts of structural racism on the Black entrepreneurial experience. And in my work as an entrepreneurship educator at the Florida A&M University, happy homecoming Rattlers,